I've had my 5 shots of espresso here on a Thursday ahead of Week 7. I am highly caffeinated and stimulated, as is the Lock Doctor, Tripp Hurd. I am Kyle Schassburger. This is the Phil Steele Show. This is his program every single week, every Thursday, coming to you on the College Sports Now family of networks, the podcast network. You can find Phil weekly with Wayne Cook and Stephen Hartzell. Just go back one more episode. And, of course, on the Varsity Network channel on YouTube. Appreciate all the subscribers. Subscribe if you haven't already. Get those notifications. Over 1,000 viewers again last week, which is incredibly impressive, I think, because we had such a light slate, Phil. It was supposed to be apple picking weekend. We had 43 total games. And what did that mean? Chaos. 5 of the top 11 go down. 2 of the top 5 in the SEC both lose to unranked teams for the first time in the history of the Southeastern Conference. And Phil, you're off another winning week. By the way, I am Kyle Schassburger. I did not have a winning week. I'm at Kyle Schass at Doc of the Locks on Twitter for Tripp and at Phil Steele 042. Phil, you're feeling good. You're on a heater, man, as we reach the near midway points of the college football season.
Yeah, and what a week last week was. Huh? Everybody talked about it's a boring week. There's only one ranked versus ranked matchup. And then, as you mentioned, 5 of the top 11 go down versus unranked teams. Just an amazing weekend.
Are you a baseball guy, Phil, before we pivot to football? Because the Guardians have their backs up against the wall, the Cleveland baseball team. Do you watch Cleveland baseball at all?
I watch college football, Kyle.
Okay.
So I can say that the folks coming in the office this morning were a little depressed, and I'm like, what's up? And they're like, well, the Indians lost. And I had no clue. I do not watch baseball. I just watch college football. When I leave work, I go home and watch taped college football. And I don't even watch the NFL on Sundays. I watch college football on Sundays.
That's the answer we expected, right, Tripp?
It's not a bad life. I mean, it's really not.
Tripp was watching baseball.
I actually, I don't watch a lot of baseball either. I'm not a big baseball guy, but we did have the Mets game on right when the guy hit the grand slam last night. So I think my daughter might be turning into a little bit of a Mets fan. She got a kick out of that. So pretty cool to watch.
Well, we know Phil won't be crushed if they do drop the series down 2-1 to Detroit on Thursday night in the divisional round. We'll get to football, and our fearless leader, Stephen Hartzell, is going to be at this first game, which Tripp will take us to in Harrisonburg. James Madison hosting Coastal, Tripp.
Yeah, Coastal on the road at JMU tonight, taking on the Fighting Hartzels. JMU favored by 9.5. Totals up at 61. Duke's coming off a straight-up loss to Louisiana Monroe as a 17-point favorite in that one too. Some teams just don't know how to handle themselves after picking up a win in the Chapel Hill Library. They've also won the last 2 in this series pretty easily, 47-7 in 2022 and 56-14 last season. But 9.5, that's a pretty big spread in this game, if you ask me, for JMU to cover here.
Yeah, I think it is. And JMU has probably been the more impressive of the 2 teams this year. A couple of weeks back, I liked Coastal plus the points against Virginia. They really let me down. Although last week they bounced back and beat Old Dominion at home. But their defense against the run, giving up 4.9 yards per carry. James Madison just 3.6. So I give the defensive edge to JMU, the home edge to JMU. But I had James Madison winning this game by a touchdown. I think 9.5 is a little pricey, so I'm going to lean with the underdog here.
Hartzell is going to be playing hooky from CSN on a Felder Friday, too, tomorrow. For those that are on the podcast feed, yours truly, Kyle Schassburger, will be co-hosting. Tripp Hurd will be along, and Michael Felder, so tune into that one. MTSU at Louisiana Tech. It's a pair of 1-4 teams, Phil. Thursday night also MTSU 1-4 against the spread under Derek Mason this year, both seeking their first win and first FBS win on the season. Bulldogs lead all-time 5-3. Sonny Cumbie against Derek Mason. Bulldogs are laying 4.5, 49 the total, 8 o'clock on CBS Sports Network, Phil.
Yeah, and a couple of keys here for Louisiana Tech. First of all, it's a 3rd year for Cumbie, the first year for Mason, so I think he's in a lot better shape there. And if you look at Cumbie, he's got a good record at home, not as good a record on the road. And this year, the losses were to FIU, which I think is an underrated team. They only lost by a touchdown. Tulsa at home, a game that went back and forth. And then NC State, if you watch the first half of that game, Louisiana Tech led 17-6, had a dominant edge, and somehow slipped up and lost it at the end. So I think it's a Louisiana Tech team that's getting ready to put some wins together and have themselves a decent season. Middle, I think, in the first year, for their new head coach, I think they're going to struggle. And Louisiana Tech's at home. My computer's actually got Louisiana Tech by 12. So I like Louisiana Tech minus the points here.
UTEP and Western Kentucky, they'll kick at 8 tonight. Western Kentucky looking to get back on track after losing that lead at Boston College a couple of weeks ago. Tonight, UTEP in town. The Toppers are favored by 19.5. Pretty big spread there, but UTEP's really struggled on offense this season. I'm leaning a little towards Western Kentucky here. I also think the under is in play. Totals at 57. This game's gone under in 3 of the last 4 meetings. All of those won by WKU.
Yeah, and I also side with Western Kentucky here. You go back a couple weeks ago, the Middle Tennessee game. TJ Finley got injured. I believe it was the first drive of the game, and Caden Veldkamp stepped in. Veldkamp's been a remarkable revelation here. He's hitting 70% with an 8.4 ratio. As you mentioned, they almost beat Boston College, led that game in the fourth quarter. They did beat Toledo, a very good Toledo team, maybe the best team in the MAC, and dominated Middle Tennessee on the road. I think they scored on almost every offensive drive that Veldkamp had there. And UTEP, it's been a struggle. Now, they brought in a new head coach from the FCS in Scotty Walden. He brought in some players with him, but they have struggled each and every week. And probably their biggest struggle has been our run defense, giving up 238 yards per game, 5.2 yards per carry. So I think Western's a better team at home. I'm going to side with Western in this one as well. Not one of my top 5 or 10 plays of the week, but if I'm going to play this game, I'm going to take the favorite.
Phil's power plays will come at the conclusion of this show in about 50 minutes or so. Again, off of 2 in 1 week. He went 3-0 2 weeks ago. So getting all the intel you need here ahead of week 7, 53 total games, 9 more than last week. And before we move to Friday, a reminder, philsteele.com. Go there now. Unlimited space. So much more information, daily blogs, team standings, polls, all conference teams, all American teams. So much more great articles and information. The magazine, of course, is still available. Go get it. It's always available. The most comprehensive college football preview mag over the last 29 years. All right, Phil, Northwestern at Maryland. 8 o'clock game on Fox Friday. Terps are laying 10, 46.5 total. These are 2 improving offenses. Phil, Wildcats' Jack Lausch has looked more comfortable under center after throwing for 243 and a 41-24 loss to IU. The Terps' Billy Edwards has thrown for over 1,400 yards, thrown just 2 picks, and accounted for 13 total touchdowns. I think this is trending towards the overplay, which is now at 46.5. It's gone up a slight tick. What do you think here, Phil? Friday night has delivered here over the last few weeks. I think that trend is going to continue.
Yeah, and actually, these two both, their last game was against Indiana. And while the scores were very similar, I thought Northwestern played maybe even a better game because Maryland benefited from +4 in turnovers and still lost by 14. Whereas Northwestern had even turnovers and lost by 17. I was impressed with Jack Lausch because, you go back and look at that Washington game. Northwestern had just 112 yards offense for the entire game, 12 first downs. I believe they were given the ball at the 2-yard line and didn't score a touchdown, only 5 points for the game. So wasn't impressed there, but was impressed that they moved the ball on Indiana like they did. At one point, they were only down by 3. Hoosiers did get the cover for me last week. I appreciate that, but I came away impressed with Northwestern. However, I just feel Maryland's a better team. They're at home. As you mentioned, Billy Edwards having a heck of a season, 11-2 ratio, hitting 72%. Northwestern's offense, in Big Ten play, their tops is 336 yards. Meanwhile, Maryland can't put the yards up. And I like Maryland's defense as well. You look at a defensive front 7 for Maryland. They've got a lot of talent there. So I think Maryland's a better team at home. I'm going to side with the Terps minus the points in this one.
9 o'clock kick for UNLV, who's back in action on Friday night. No longer unbeaten, no longer ranked after that loss to Syracuse in overtime. Rebels are in a nice little get-right spot here, though, as they head on the road to take on Utah State. UNLV lane 19 is what I'm seeing right now. Utah State allowed 62 points last week at Boise, but honestly, they give up a lot of points to everybody. They gave up 45 to Temple, and they're not a very good spread team. UNLV has been a pretty good spread team here. They also should be motivated. I like UNLV. I don't hate the over either. It's very high. It's 66, but I could see that happening here against a team like Utah State. What do you think, Phil?
Yeah, and I'm going to say this about Utah State. I think that they're going to be better in the upcoming weeks than what you expect. Spencer Petras returned to the lineup 2 weeks ago. And in that Temple game, they actually had a 300 to 192 yard edge at the half, 21-17 first down edge. Keep in mind they were traveling all the way across the country, playing on the East Coast. Ended up losing that thing in the second half. But here's the stat that really jumped out at me with the Boise game, and I had to double check that the stats were correct, and they were. In the first half against Boise last week, they had 337 yards offense. So, Tripp, that points to your over. This is a Utah State team that probably a sneaky offense. You look at the last 2 weeks with Petrus at quarterback, 479 yards at Temple, 507 yards against Boise, average, about 26 first downs in those games. I think Utah State can score. Probably your best play here would be the over. I think Utah State's going to be sneaky these next couple of weeks and start covering some games.
You always do that, Phil. Right when I think I've got one, you get me to pump my brakes there, and I appreciate it. I need that.
How about Ashton Genty? Did he even play the second half? I mean,
No, he did not.
182 yards in the first half, just running wild. He's your Heisman favorite now, plus 225 odds.
Very impressive. Number 16, Utah. 6.5-point favorite at Arizona State tomorrow night. Utes off a bye and off a loss to Arizona at home, where they never lose. Sun Devils this year 4-1, maybe a surprising 4-1. They got their first Big 12 win last week against Kansas. We get to do the whole Cam Rising dance again. Is he going to play? Is he not going to play? I don't know. I think Arizona State's pretty good on defense. 20th versus the run, 27th in total yards, but not crazy about the spot here because they are getting the Utes off a loss.
Yeah. Is Cam Rising going to play? Hey, I tell you what, I'm not falling for the banana and the tailpipe routine again. I'm just going to say it's Isaac Wilson is going to be the starting quarterback for Utah until I actually see Cam Rising come back and get on the field. But this is a series Utah's just absolutely dominated. You go back to last year, Utah won the game 55-3. The last 4 meetings that these guys have played, Utah's won by an average of 25.5 points per game. And while I do feel Arizona State is a much improved team this year, and they have been playing better in each and every game, I still thought at the beginning of the year, Utah was one of the top teams in the Big 12. I still feel they are. The Arizona loss might have been a different game had they capitalized on their first 3 drives. They had 3 long drives to open the game, got stopped on downs twice, settled for a short field goal, and ended up losing that game at home. But let's go back to the Oklahoma State game. They led that thing 22-3 in the fourth quarter with about 5 minutes left in the game. Other than that, they played extremely well. So I think Utah is still one of the top teams in the Big 12. Arizona State may be middle of the pack. It's a win situation. I'll go with the team that's dominated the series. I like Utah minus the points here.
Phil, we've covered 6 games. We've yet to get to Saturday. That ends now. We did have 4 games scheduled for Friday. Certainly some heavy hearts thinking of all those who are being impacted by Hurricane Milton here in the southeast, the state of Florida. Saw some disturbing images just earlier about Tropicana Field in St. Petersburg and the roof being completely ripped off. So thinking again about all those who are dealing with the catastrophic effects of Milton. Let's head to Saturday. Memphis and USF, by the way, moved from Friday to Saturday. We'll get to that game in a moment. 7th-ranked Alabama at home against South Carolina as a 3-touchdown favorite, 51 the total, 12 o'clock on ABC. Phil, Tide are recovering from their first loss to Vanderbilt in 40 years. All the goodwill that Kalen DeBoer had gained in the Georgia win, somewhat or seemingly all of it, has evaporated. How will the Tide respond at home against USC, who fell 27-3 to Ole Miss? Shane Beamer called it the most disappointed he's ever been as a head football coach. DeBoer, I'm sure, shares some of those sentiments as Vandy's goalposts were taken into the Cumberland River. First time that either coach, Phil, has faced the other team. Bama laying the 3 TDs.
Yeah, and you got to think Bama off a loss, plays extremely hard in this game after pretty much mailing it in against Vanderbilt last week. And the thing with South Carolina that, I want to point out about the Mississippi game is the way it started. Fake punt gets stopped. Mississippi gets a short field for a touchdown. They bring in Robbie Ashford off the bench for one play. He fumbles. Once again, Mississippi gets a short field for a touchdown. And then once it was 14-0, South Carolina is not the team that can come back from something like that. And we saw that last week against Ole Miss. So I think if Bama jumps out to the lead, Bama can stay in front, will put the hammer down. They've given the option. And I think you'll see Jalen Milroe run the football a little bit more this week. I know my game plan as a head coach coming into last week would have been, hey, you know what? I'm going to rest Milroe a little bit. I'm not going to use him in my big games, but I'm going to use the rest of my offense. And it came back to bite him last week. So look for Milroe to run. And I'm going to go with Bama minus the points in this one.
Another noon kick in Winston-Salem on Saturday. What a win for Wake Forest last week at NC State. I was telling you on that one, Phil. Appreciate the pick there. They trailed by 10 in the fourth quarter, though, before they came back to win. Hope they enjoyed it because they get number 10 Clemson in town this Saturday. Tigers, they've been humming lately. They didn't need much last week to beat Florida State on the road there. But as you mentioned in some of the previous weeks here, a lot of the young guys stepping up for Clemson on offense. They've racked up over 400 yards in 4 straight games. Going to be hard for the Deeks to keep up with Clemson here.
Yeah, it will be. But, you look at the setting. It's a different type of setting for Clemson after playing Florida State last week. Now it's a little bit more of a sleepy game here against Wake Forest, not a rabid crowd that they're running into. And what we've seen is Wake Forest has actually covered 7 of the last 11 games, 4 of the last 5 against Clemson. I like how Bachmeier's throwing the ball. Claiborne has been solid running it. Clemson's a juggernaut. I just wish they wouldn't settle for so many damn field goals against Florida State. Last week they settle for? Like 7 field goals in that game, Tripp?
Yeah, it was a lot. You had to get on the Tigers early there to catch the cover.
Yeah, definitely. And when we did the show, it was 14.5. We rose to 16.5 later in the week, which became very important. So I like Clemson to win the game. I like them to win comfortably. I think their offense is explosive. They got an outstanding defense. I don't know if this is one of their A games. And for Wake Forest, they usually play Clemson pretty tough. I'm probably staying away from this one.
Well, Phil, it will be a little bit of a rabid crowd there. It'll just be all Clemson fans in Winston-Salem.
Well, the thing about that crowd, too, they'll be enjoying what is the Carolina Classic Fair that is going to be going on concurrently with that contest. You can get things. And, hell, the Wake football team just might mail it in after 3 quarters and go get themselves some moonshine chicken on a stick. They might need it after that. You can also get a bourbon chicken bowl, a slop bucket, plenty of good food. We're not talking about the Texas State Fair on the show, okay? We're talking about the Carolina Classic Fair. Let's move on. Next game, Washington at Iowa. The Hawkeyes are laying 2.5 points, 40.5 is the total. Just gross. 12 o'clock is the kick at Kinnick Stadium. Phil, we work in radio. This is a Learfield production. The Washington Huskies radio network is going live on the air local time at 5 a.m. ahead of a 9 a.m. local kick. This will be 11 a.m. locally in the Central Time Zone at Kinnick. This will be the first meeting between these two since the Sun Bowl in 1995. Billy Madison, Heavyweights, Casper, any of those movies ring a bell? Some of my favorites as a kid, even Major Payne. Kirk Ferentz is seeking his 200th win at Iowa. Put him 5 back of Woody Hayes, most wins all time as a Big Ten coach, currently tied with Amos Alonzo Stagg of Chicago. What do you like here, Phil, and the Huskies visiting the Hawkeyes?
Yeah, I think you have 2 really good teams. Washington has been more impressive than I thought they would be this year. You go back to last week's game against Michigan, a nice 10-point win at home. Their defense is number 3 in the country, holding foes to 146 yards below their season average. And offensively, they're gaining 110 yards above what opponents normally allow. They've got Will Rogers. They've got Jonah Coleman. However, Iowa's a really good team as well. And you look at their 2 losses. Iowa State. Iowa State might be the best team in the Big 12. They're undefeated. It's a game Iowa led big in the fourth quarter, led by 2 scores, ended up losing on a late score, lost that 1 by 1. And then last week they lose to Ohio State, another undefeated team. So they haven't lost to a team that has a loss. I think Iowa, you look at the rest of their schedule, this is still a team that it could be poised for a 10-2 season. I love their defense, although they've given up more yards than normal. But they've got the run game with Caleb Johnson, and the situation's tremendous. As you talked about, 9 o'clock in the morning for the time clock for Washington, coming off a big win and now having to go on the road, that's a big thing for Iowa. And the other thing in their favor is we follow the Big Ten this year. Teams that are traveling over 2 time zones. The team that is at home is 8-1. Straight up, I believe 9-0 ATS 7-2 ATS with the 2 covers, both back doors. So I think Iowa is as good, if not better, than Washington at home in a better situation. I like Iowa, and they're only laying 2.5.
They did play Ohio State tough for at least a half. Jed Fish did get his biggest win in Seattle yet and knocking off Michigan, one of those 5 top 11 teams to go down last week. Caleb Johnson for Iowa, over 2,000 rushing yards for his career. That's 16th in Hawkeye program history.
Are we back on the under here for Iowa now? I mean, we had our fun with, 4 overs in a row, but I think Washington's one of those teams that can hold teams under their averages on offense. So
What's the total, Tripp?
40 and a half.
Okay. Yeah, I would lean with the under.
Yeah, I don't hate it either. All right, moving to Wisconsin and Rutgers. We may have been a little worried about Wisconsin after they got blown out at home against Alabama, then kind of blown out in the second half against USC, but they bounced back in a big way last week against Purdue. 52-6 was the final there. Might not be so many points this week as they go on the road to visit Rutgers. The total in this one's only around 40 as well. And Scarlet Knights favored by 2.5 at home. A lot of injuries at wide receiver for the Badgers here coming into this one, which is a little bit of a concern here.
Yeah, it is. And, I pointed out with Wisconsin that the Alabama game, while they lost 42-10 and the narrative was they got blown out by Alabama, watching the game, the good plays, bad plays were 50-50 in the first half. In fact, at one point, Bama only had a 151 to 148 yard edge. They led because Wisconsin didn't score touchdowns in the red zone. Alabama did. And then Alabama got a late touchdown right before the half to go up 21-3 and controlled the second half. And as you pointed out, the USC game, they led that thing 21-10 at the half. USC's winning touchdown, I believe, was an interception return for a touchdown to get the cover. So they played both of those quality teams in tough situations, much better than the scores would indicate. And last week it showed against Purdue. But now they are going on the road. I thought Rutgers struggled. I mean, Rutgers blocked 2 punts last week and still only scored 7 points. They couldn't score off of either block punt, including getting one at the 2-yard line. The key to stopping Rutgers is to take away the run with Monangai, make Ethan Kelly McManus throw the ball. Kelly McManus has been better than he was in Minnesota last year. He's got his offense coordinator, Kirk Shiraka, back from 2 years ago where he looked good. He has an 8-3 ratio this year. I think Rutgers fired up at home. I had Rutgers winning by 3, so I was going to let the lines maker decide who I like in this one. And I believe I like Rutgers because it's 2.5, right?
Yep.
2.5 it is. Let's go to Chapel Hill and take a moment to remind you, too, Phil Steele Plus, that weekly YouTube tour is available now. Follow Phil on Twitter at PhilSteele042. You'll see it. It's the latest tweet that he's had from the X Machine 26 minutes ago to this moment. Guaranteed winners, quick hitters, all that good stuff. Phil Steele Plus, $99 value. Go to philsteele.com for more information. Much more in-depth stats, all the analytics, the green, red, color coding features, everything you need to help get you right for Week 7 and more. But the Phil Steele Plus tour is free. That's available now. Go follow Phil on Twitter at PhilSteele042. To Chapel Hill now in Keenan, North Carolina is catching 6. Road favorite Georgia Tech enters. 59 is the total, 12 o'clock on the CW. Phil Jackets seeking a 4th straight win over UNC, 6th in the last 7 meetings, and looking for their first 5-2 start in a decade. Covered last week. That really hurt me. 24-14 in a home win over Duke. Carolina's dropped 3 in a row. Rolled the dice going for it on 4th down against Pitt 6 times, converting just twice in their first ever loss to the Panthers in Chapel Hill. I love the running back matchup here, Phil, and Jamal Haynes against Amari and Hampton. And DC Tyler Santucci, the old Duke coordinator for Georgia Tech. I mean, he's been unreal. That rushing defense is one of the best in all of the country, holding opponents under 88 yards per game. So Santucci scheming against Amari and Hampton, that's what I'm looking at here. Can the Jackets cover the 6, though, on the road?
Yeah, and the thing about Georgia Tech is they are tremendous as an underdog. Put them as an underdog against a ranked team, look out. They almost always win. But not so much in the favorites role. Even last week against Duke, they only won by 10. Earlier, they were a road favorite at Syracuse, came up short, trailed that thing by 17 points in the 4th quarter. And I went with Pitt over North Carolina last week, and I was expecting North Carolina to maybe mail it in now the rest of the season after blowing that game against Duke and blown out by James Madison. But I was impressed with the fight that North Carolina showed against Pitt. It wasn't an easy win, but Pitt got the win for me last week. I just think North Carolina's in a spot where, they showed me they can fight. They're at home. Georgia Tech's not a great favorite. I think North Carolina can win this one outright. I like the Tar Heels in this one with Hampton, and I like the way Criswell's throwing the football as well.
Hampton is 5th nationally in rushing. Carolina is the only team in the country with a 100-yard rusher in all 6 games. First time they've done that since 1983. Tech limiting opponents to 88 yards a game on the ground, less than 103 straight. So matter of what's going to break when Tech meets UNC on Saturday. Also at noon, CBS Sports Network, Army laying 26 against a wounded, and that's putting it lightly, UAB squad. 54.5 is the total. Blazers got punked at home by Tulane, 71-20, just punctuating a tumultuous week for Trent Dilfer. Meanwhile, Army undefeated, seeking to become bowl eligible this early in a calendar year for the first time since 96. They're 5-0 with Navy. We're partying like it's 1945. It's the last time that happened, Phil. They started 9-0 back in 96, the Black Knights. They've won 9 straight overall dating back to last year. That's the longest win streak nationally. But can they cover the big number? It's 26.
Yeah, and I got to be honest with you, at the start of the year, I had Army picked lower in the American Conference, and they have impressed me weekly. You know, they beat Florida Atlantic by 17, dominate Rice by 23, blow out Temple by 28, and then Tulsa by 42. Both of those last two on the road. Their run game's been almost unstoppable. And Bryson Daly, he's like a linebacker playing quarterback, and he is the team's leading rusher, 602 yards, 10 touchdowns. He's also throwing the ball well. And of course, that it's easier for service academy quarterbacks to have a great completion percentage and touchdown to interception ratio because your defense is focused on stopping the run. You're going to have a lot of one-on-one matchups, and you don't even worry about the wide receiver after a little bit of time. You got some open players, but Daly has impressed me. Now, last week UAB didn't have their quarterback, Jacob Zeno. It was Kitna at QB, but I don't think it would have mattered in that game. Tulane is a buzzsaw right now. And 2 weeks ago, I like this factor in UAB's favor. They just faced the option, faced Navy, didn't do well against it. We're only outgained by 57 yards in that game, but I'm not going against Army until they actually don't cover a game. They've been super impressive all year. The number shows you how impressive they've been at 27.5, but UAB's rush defense on Phil Steele Plus, they are all red across the board on rush defense, giving up versus FBS foes, almost 7 yards a carry. That doesn't play well when you're taking on Army. I'm taking Army minus the points. Not one of the strongest plays on the board, but I'm not going against Army until they actually don't cover.
As Phil always says, bet on a streak, you can only lose once. So,
speaking of streaks, I've got a Phil Steele special for you with a tight line in the MAC, Miami, Ohio, at Eastern Michigan, 2:00 kick. EMU 5-0 against the spread this year. Only straight up loss was against Washington. Phil, have you been holding out on us here? I don't remember us talking a lot of Eastern Michigan in the last few weeks. What do you like in this game here?
Yeah, and Eastern Michigan is playing a little out of character this year. Generally, not a great favorite, but loved it. One of the best away dogs in college football is Chris Creighton. He just hasn't been an away dog. They were favored at Kent State last week, delivered the win, favored over St. Francis, and weren't even a dog at home against Jacksonville State. They're playing extremely well, and the surprise is probably Cole Snyder. He's a Buffalo transfer, didn't have a great season at Buffalo last year, sitting 64% with a 4.0 ratio. They're playing good defense, not great defense. Miami has been a bigger surprise. The fact that they come in 1-4 now. Chuck Martin generally mails in non-conference games, and maybe they did that this year a little bit, but then it's tougher when it gets to be MAC play. But they were never within 10 points or closer than 10 points in the second half against Toledo last week. Now, granted, Toledo might be the best team in the MAC. They just played them on the road, so they've also played Notre Dame, Cincinnati, Northwestern. This is one of the lightest opponents they're playing this year. I lean with Eastern because they're the dog at home, but I'm just a little nervous about Chuck Martin because he's got one of the most talented teams in the MAC, and he's proven they can play. So I'm probably leaning a little bit with Eastern, but not a big play here. I'll wait till Eastern's a big dog again.
Okay, fair enough. Let's move on to the afternoon portion here. We got top-ranked Texas taking on Oklahoma. Big spread for Red River this year. Longhorns by 14.5 is what I'm seeing now. They should have Quinn Ewers back at quarterback. He's 1-1 in this game, in the rivalry game. It had a big game 2 years back when Texas blew out Oklahoma 49-zip. But Sooners won last year, 34-30. So maybe a little revenge going here for Texas, but still a really big number in this type of game for me.
Yeah, and this is one, Kyle, where I'm going to show you what Phil Steele Plus has on the game, which amplifies what Tripp just said. And we take a look here at the games that have been played and take a look at the win totals. And if you go back and look at the last 12 years, 11 of them have been decided by 8 or less. And if you look here, The red means that they lost the game against the spread. The green means that they won. Let's look at double-digit favorites. Double-digit favorite, loss. Double-digit favorite, loss. Double-digit favorite, loss, loss, loss. 0-5 for double-digit favorites. The underdog 8-4. The series not decided by more than 8. I got to tell you, if I was just playing this game on paper without the emblems on the helmets or anything, I'd favor Texas by 17, 21 points. Oklahoma's offense has struggled all year, but this is Oklahoma, Texas. It's always tight. It's always unpredictable. I'm going to side with Oklahoma plus the 14.5. You hit it right on the head, Tripp. That's a lot of points in this rivalry game.
Phil, can I interest you in candied pork belly bacon bites or caramel macchiato fritters? We can't hold out on the food at Texas State Fair. We got to take this opportunity. Either of those tickle your fancy.
You know what, Kyle? I am a seafood eater. If I see food, I eat it. I'll eat anything. So, yeah, those would be exciting to me.
I love that. Churro crumble cheesecake as well. Some cookie butter nachos. These are some of the new items at the Texas State Fair this year. A little weird. It's not 12 noon start, 3:30. It's a crowded window. But, hey, I'm sure the fans aren't complaining. Gives them more time to get all lubricated and lumbered up before heading in to the Cotton Bowl. Penn State, fourth-ranked team in the country now, 5-0. 5-0 in each of the last 4 seasons. No other FBS team has done that. Beating USC last meeting in the 2017 Rose Bowl, Trojans won 52-49. 5-point favorites are the Nittany Lions. Jeremy Franklin, Lincoln Riley have been very outspoken about conference realignment and the new Big Ten. The negative effects this week, it was Franklin slamming the length of the runway, complicating the Nittany Lions' travel to Happy Valley. Riley's bunch was humbled at Minnesota as P.J. Fleck, the Gophers, rolled the dice with a 4th and 1 late at the goal line to win the game by a touchdown. Costly penalties really hurt USC. What do you think about the Trojans back at home at the Coliseum, 3:30 on CBS?
Yeah, and I think Penn State's a better team, especially at the line of scrimmage. You look at their offensive line, defensive line. I'll clearly take Penn State's offensive line over USC's offensive line, and I'll clearly take Penn State's defensive line against USC's defensive line. Look at the fact that Michigan ran for 290 yards on them. Penn State's only allowing 76 yards per game. You gave a stat of 88 before for a team. 76 yards per game rushing, 2.5 yards per carry. However, I'm a little surprised the number's 5. I would have put Penn State -3. I think if you look at USC, they could have easily beaten Michigan. Had Michigan not got that 65-yard run by Mullins on that last drive and convert on 4th down the last drive, they beat Michigan on the road. Last week, they led Minnesota and had the ball in the 4th quarter. They led by 7. They fumbled. Minnesota came back and beat them. So I think USC's dangerous at home. It's a tough trip for you, Penn State. I mentioned how teams are doing traveling over 2 time zones in Big Ten play. I like Penn State to win the game, but only by 3.
Let's talk Arizona BYU. We've got undefeated BYU playing host to Arizona. 4:00 kick on Fox. Cougars favored by 3.5 at home right now over the Wildcats. Maybe BYU getting some believers now. They've got 3 really good wins under their belt. 2 on the road against Baylor last week, and then earlier in the season at SMU. Really good win at home over Kansas State. These 2 coaches here, Brennan and Sataki, they both worked together at Oregon State back in 2015. Some familiarity there. They've also coached against each other when Brennan was at San Jose. I still think Arizona is a dangerous team with Fafita. I think it should be a really good game, a fun one to watch. I don't have a strong play here, Phil. What do you like?
I do like BYU in this game. And I'll tell you what, going over BYU, you go back to that SMU game. Remember when they beat SMU? You're like, wow, SMU is not very good this year, huh? Guess what? SMU is really good this year. That was a quality win. They blew out Wyoming. The Kansas State game, now granted, the first 28 minutes of the game, Kansas State controlled that thing, but then the 5 minutes happened where BYU took control and BYU actually, beat Kansas State by 29 and then going on the road and beating Baylor like they did, jumping out to a 21-0 lead. I've seen 5 games, and I've seen 5 good games from BYU. From Arizona, I saw a very bad first half against New Mexico where the yards were even. They gave up over 300 yards in Mexico, barely led at the half. I saw a game against Northern Arizona where at the half they actually trailed and only beat Northern Arizona by 12. The Kansas State second half was awful. They had a 14-7 deficit turned into 31-7. They did beat Utah. That was an impressive game. And then last week against Texas Tech, a bad first half, ended up losing the game and never led. So I've seen nothing but good from BYU. I've seen a lot of bad on Arizona's part. It's second straight home game or second straight week that the BYU's been in the altitude. And I've always researched this, and teams that are in the altitude a second straight week, it actually heightens that altitude advantage. I just got to go with BYU minus the points here. I think they're the better team, and have the home situation and the advantage here.
Tripp, what about a hot Cheetos Korean corn dog? Sorry, I'm getting distracted. BigTex.com. You get a list of all these new items. What a URL for the Texas State Fair. Half hot dog, half mozzarella cheese, battered with wheat and rice flour, coated with panko breadcrumbs, deep fried for an extra crispy crunch.
Wow.
There's some spicy mayo on there as well. Sounds good.
I'll try it.
Yeah. I'll dabble. Cal is a 3-point dog at 22nd ranked Pitt. 3:30 on ESPN. Miami completed a 25-point comeback at Berkeley to spoil a hallmark day for the Golden Bears, winning 39-38. Pitt hasn't been 6-0 since 1982. I'm fired up for the Desmond Reed and Jay Knott matchup. Ott returned from injury last week, looked really good, had a long touchdown. How about this? Very fitting, Phil. Here's a stat nugget for you. I like to go back in the hot tub time machine and, create some historical relevance of sorts. 1966 is the last time these two teams met. All right. That's the same year that Caesars Casino and Hotel opened on the Vegas Strip. Not only that, the ATM was invented, part of the lifeblood of wagering on these games.
Wow. Very interesting. I love the stats you pull out. I learn something every week, so I appreciate that. To me, this is a tough matchup because you guys know I love Justin Wilcox as an underdog. He's one of the better underdogs out there, delivered again as a dog last week. But Pitt's playing so doggone well. You mentioned Desmond Reed. How about Eli Holstein at the quarterback spot? 15 touchdown passes, just 3 interceptions. And when I talked to Narduzzi this spring, I said, Coach, you're losing a lot of weapons from a defense that sort of underperformed last year. He felt that despite the losses, they'd be better on defense. And this year, they are holding opponents to 29 yards per game below their season average. The situation really favors Pitt. Cal's got to travel across the country 1 week after hosting game day, big game at home, and now they're traveling, playing early. So I think it's a good situation. Talent's there for Pitt. I don't know if I want to go against Wilcox as a dog. I'm going to let you guys pick this one.
I'll take Pitt.
Yeah, I like Pitt. It's easy to pull for Cal and Justin Wilcox, and they've been through a gauntlet here early on with the travel. Stanford too, it's what you signed up for. But I don't know. Pitt's got so much momentum, and that Caden Bell offense is. I don't know if Cal can slow it down.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed watching Pitt's quarterback Holstein, and we were in Charlotte for ACC Media Days. He wasn't the quarterback they sent. They sent Nate Yarnell, and good on Yarnell, because I think the only time I've seen him come in was for, I don't know if Holstein got his helmet knocked off in the red zone in one game a couple weeks back. He came in one play, threw 1 touchdown, and then he was back to the sideline. So great job for Nate there too.
How about our favorite tight end? Gavin Bartholomew for Pitt, and then Maine, that hair, and that's a dapper
flowing
dude,
locks.
Man. So jealous.
He was. Let's talk Louisville, Virginia. Big setback last week for Louisville with that home loss to SMU. That was a great call, Phil. You were on the ponies last week. Now the Cards head to Charlottesville to face Virginia. 3:30 kick. Louisville laying 7 on the road here. Virginia last week scored 18 in the fourth quarter against BC, returned a fumble to seal the win. Really good on the Cavaliers for a surprising 4-1 start to the year here. Tony Elliott seems to have something going there at Virginia. They're a tough team to bet against right now, Phil.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? What I've found throughout the years, and it's changed a little bit with the transfer portal, but generally coaches in their third year, that's when they really make hay. Why? They've had 3 recruiting classes, or at least 2 good ones and 1 moderate one. Their first one's always a tough one because you're signed so late. And now all the players know the systems. The coaches know all the players inside and out. And usually a third year is when you blossom. And this is by far Tony Elliott's best team. I like the move of Calandria to the quarterback. You remember he was battling Musket, and it was a toss-up, but I think he chose the right one here. They've got the run game with Xavier Brown, and Kobe Pace, the Clemson transfer, really came on last week as well. They also have some dangerous receivers like Malachi Fields, and defensively they're playing well. Now, Louisville, a couple weeks back against Georgia Tech, I thought Georgia Tech outplayed them at home and probably should have won the game, but they managed to win with 2 scores by the defense and special teams. They lost to Notre Dame by 7 and lost to SMU last week. I got to side with Virginia plus the 7. I think Virginia's got a chance of winning this one outright. I'm taking the Cavaliers here.
On Tuesday, this game was rescheduled because of the forecasted impacts of Hurricane Milton. That's Memphis at USF. Right now, time of our taping, Phil, game is still on. Ryan Silverfield for Memphis has said as much. Seen an update from a couple of hours ago. So they're playing on Saturday. It's 3:30. It's not Friday night. Not sure that changed much of the handicapping. But on ESPN, Memphis is favored by 7.5. 61 is the total. Neither team won their AAC opener. Tigers lead all time 8-4, won 59-50 at the Liberty Bowl last season, almost 1,200 combined yards. Last USF win came on the road with a 49-42 win in 2016. So there tends to be a lot of points between these two teams.
Yeah, and you could probably expect that again here. I think when you look at USF, there's sort of a team a little bit like Wisconsin in the fact that you go back to that Alabama game. That thing was a one-score game in the fourth quarter. They ended up losing at 42-16. You go back to the Miami of Florida game just before the half. It's I believe South Florida led 15-14 or something like that, and the yards were actually close. Miami got that touchdown right before the half, and then the second half was a different story. So I think South Florida has shown they can play that way. Now Tulane's a buzzsaw. That was a tough game last week or 2 weeks ago, and it's one that I think Alex Golish is a guy that's pretty much embarrassed by that loss. So I think we're going to see USF's best shot, maybe their best game of the season right here this week. Memphis under Silverfield is always tough. They're almost unbeatable in Liberty Bowl at home, but on the road, not so much. They're only 7-13 against the spread and have about a 500 record straight up. So even though USF's had all this stuff going on at home with the hurricane and everything, I think that's going to help them pull together. That and the fact they were embarrassed in their last game. I like USF plus the points in this one to possibly pull the upset.
Sean Lewis and San Diego State, 2.5-point dogs. Favorites, actually, is what I'm seeing. Yeah, favorites at Wyoming, 3:30, CBS Sports Network. Jay Salvell got his first win as the Cowboys head coach against Air Force. Last time out, Pokes, 1-4 overall, 8 and ATS. Total has gone over in 4 of 5 previous Cowboys games. 69 degrees expected for Laramie's War Memorial Stadium. Favorable conditions. First trip for the Aztecs to Laramie since 2016, which was the first of 2 meetings in 3 weeks. Take you back to 2016. That was a Josh Allen-led Cowboys team that won the regular season meeting 34-33 after San Diego State failed on a 2-point conversion for the win with no time remaining. Aztecs did get revenge, though, in the Mountain West title game.
Interesting. Appreciate that. And, in this matchup, I think the wrong team's favored. When you look at San Diego State, they haven't been overwhelming this year. Lost at Central, barely got past Hawaii. They needed a late score to win that one, and we're outgained in that game. And out first down, 24-19. Now they've got to go on the road. They've got to play a Wyoming team that's been in the altitude for 3 straight weeks. They had a bye last week, so it's a good situation for them. And as putrid as Wyoming looked at the start of the year, you go back to getting Arizona State led them 48-0. They scored a touchdown in the final seconds. They lose to Idaho at home. They did have the yardage edge. They lost to BYU at home by 20 and weren't really in that game, and then got blown out by North Texas. They were down against Air Force at the half, outgained 219-83. And in the second half, Wyoming all of a sudden discovered itself. Evan Svoboda, who Coach Salvell was very high on, had a really good second half. They came back and beat Air Force. Now they've had a bye. And you know what their Mountain West record is, despite all this horrid play? 1-0. And if they beat San Diego State, now you're looking at 2-0. They can actually salvage their season. So I think it's a really good situation for Wyoming. I like them to – I think the wrong team's favored here. I think Wyoming should be favored.
All right, let's jump to San Jose State. 4-1 this year, unable to cover last week against Nevada. This week they're on the road at Colorado State. Spartans a 1.5 point favorite right now from what I'm seeing. Do you like either side of this one, Phil?
Yeah, I like Colorado State. They showed me a lot last week. I liked Oregon State in that game. And I was surprised the way Colorado State moved the ball on Oregon State. They have 429 yards offense. Like the way that Morrow ran the ball. And, Fowler Nicolzi has been sort of 50-50 so far this year. He only has a 4-4 ratio, but he threw the ball pretty decently against a good Oregon State team. And that was in Reser Stadium, which is really tough. So I think when you look at Colorado State, they're a team that is going to play better in the second half of the season, much like I said about Wyoming. And San Jose, I think they've benefited from a fairly manageable schedule so far. Barely got past Nevada. They did play a good game at Washington State, but I think Colorado State might be the better team here. I'm going to take Colorado State plus the points at home.
The beauty of having Phil on every Thursday is we know every game is in his wheelhouse. Every single game. It's his specialty. He sleeps, he lives, he breathes, he eats college football. That's all he watches, as he said at the top of the show. But the MAC, the Mid-American Conference, pulls on your heartstrings like none other, as Tripp brought up earlier with the Miami and the Eastern Michigan game. So I got another MAC play for you here. Northern Illinois at Bowling Green. Falcons favored by 3, 47.5 total, 3:30 on ESPN+. Huskies have covered in their only 2 previous road games, winning outright at Notre Dame, and then as a heavy dog. And 2 weeks ago, losing by just a tutty at NC State. Bowling Green has had a monster schedule as well. They gave Penn State and Texas A&M all they could handle, losing by a combined 13 points. So to me, it's a fantastic MAC showdown. Who's long for the league? That's what we're going to learn. NIU scored 27 second-half points in a UMass win. Bowling Green lost at ODU, though, so they've slipped up, and Bowling Green barely got past Akron. What do you like here?
Yeah, they lost at ODU or versus ODU, but that was the week after playing Texas A&M to the wire. So, I mean, these are 2 teams that are both among you look at Toledo, Bowling Green, and Northern Illinois. It's tough to draw much difference between them because, as you mentioned, Bowling Green actually led Penn State at the half, 24-20, and had the yardage edge. They've had 286 yards on Penn State's defense in the first half, and then almost knocked off A&M at home. We see how tough A&M is. And with Northern Illinois, you touched on it, beating Notre Dame and then almost beating NC State. So these are 2 really good MAC teams. I'd love to have a strong play on a MAC game for you. But my line on this would be take the home team by 3, Bowling Green by 3. And what's the line on the game, guys?
BG by 3.
BG by 3. So I find it tough to go against either of these 2 teams because they both have proven they can play with anybody. So I would just take the home team by 3. And I will have solid, great MAC plays for you in future weeks. But this play it's tough to go against either one of them.
It's a popcorn game in the MAC. Nothing better. Mid-American Conference action. Just strap in and get the popcorn going. Just enjoy it. Maybe a frosty cold beverage. There'll be plenty of frosty cold beverages to go around in the evening slate, especially with second-ranked Ohio State and a third-ranked Oregon. Ducks, a 3-point dog at home, 7:30 on NBC. You can catch both sides of this on the Blitz. Stephen Hartzell, then Phil Brame hosting throughout the day, 12 Eastern at noon, all the way until 12 midnight. Download the Varsity Network app for all these out-of-market games, the hometown radio call, and, of course, on SiriusXM channel 84 as well, the college sports channel. So the Blitz, Phil was on the Blitz again this past weekend, which I know you enjoyed yourself late. It's kind of a different platform for you, too. We're previewing games. I asked the producer of the evening slate, Aaron Brunk, who you may have chatted with before coming onto the show. I asked him yesterday over golf. I'm like, how different is it with Phil? Because he's used to setting up these games. And for you, Phil, it's about good wins, bad losses, sizing up how certain results can impact other teams throughout the rest of the year, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just watched all the games. I got my 12 TVs on. I'm watching every single game. So you could ask me about any game that's been played that day, and I'll give you a complete analysis of it.
So let's talk about the Buckeyes and the Ducks. Second top 4 feature presentation in 3 weeks. First top 5 battle ever inside Autzen Stadium. Ohio State 9-1 all-time. Fell in the most recent matchup, 2021, 35-28 Oregon win at the Shoe. Second meeting in Eugene. Buckeyes last visited 1967, October 7th, 130-0. That means nothing now. I get it, but I love to give the historical artifacts, contextualize the matchup some more. Dylan Gabriel visited both Oregon and Ohio State. This is my favorite part, Phil. Didn't learn this till yesterday. Dylan Gabriel had visited both places when he was looking to transfer from Oklahoma. He decided on Oregon because he hit the links up with Dan Lanning and enjoyed his golf outing so much with the Oregon head coach. Who do you like in this matchup, though, Saturday night?
Interesting. Yeah, 1967, that would have been Woody Hayes. Going to take on probably a poor Oregon team because Oregon was not great. And that was the year before Ohio State won the national championship in 68. So that's interesting.
Look at this. A walking encyclopedia. Why are we not surprised?
But taking a look at this matchup, Autzen Stadium at night, talked to some Oregon people, and they feel this may be the biggest home game ever for Oregon. So they're going to be fired up for this one. And Kyle, go ahead and put the screen thing on. I just want to show you some of the stats that are here. We've got spread things for every team, including versus top 10 teams. And I found this fascinating. The Ducks versus top 10 teams, 11-6 over the last 10 years. And I believe they're 8-2 as a home dog versus top 10 teams, or at home versus top 10 teams. And then look at Ohio State. This might surprise you. If you take away this 4-1, they are actually 9-18-1 over the last 8 years versus top 10 teams. So they struggle in the spread versus top 10. They thrive versus the spread versus top 10. It's Autzen. It's at night. It's long travel. And the Ducks the last 2 weeks, if you take a look at them, the Ducks have played extremely well. They gave up the backdoor touchdown. They led 31-0 against Michigan State. The UCLA game, that's the one that was should have been 35-3 at the half, was only 28-10. So I think when you look at this matchup, I'm actually going to call for the upset. Take Oregon plus the points over Ohio State.
That'll be a good game. We've got another one at 7:30 with Ole Miss and LSU. The Lane Train got back on track last week at South Carolina. They're back on the road in the SEC 2 weeks in a row here at LSU. I can't wait to watch this one. Rebels are favored by 3.5 in Death Valley. Two really good quarterbacks here. I like Nussmeier a lot for the Tigers. We know Dart and that offense for Ole Miss can keep up with anyone. I think there's going to be a lot of points in this game. I trust the Ole Miss defense a little bit better, but it's night. It's LSU, Death Valley. Really hard to bet against LSU here.
Yeah, and numerous things on LSU side. As you mentioned, I think you hit it correctly, Tripp. Both teams' offense is very close. Defensively, you got to give the edge to Ole Miss over LSU, even though LSU is a new defense coordinator in Blake Baker. But the two things that really stand out to me, and Kyle, just flip over to this one for 1 second. Over here, we give you the last 27 years matchups. And if the word is win, that means that the home team won straight up. So as you could tell, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-2 straight up. But the green means they covered. So how about this? The home team is 10-1 against the spread. And it figures. Death Valley, it's almost impossible to win there, especially as a dog. LSU's got a great home dog record. And then the other thing I like about this matchup is the schedule. LSU is fresh off a bye. Ole Miss, meanwhile, has played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is their 7th straight game, 2nd straight on the road. So the situation, the home dog, the series, it all favors LSU. And what a better venue than LSU at night, right? And so I'm going to take LSU plus the points in this one.
Kyle, okay, I love it. Yeah. No, you're starting to steer me in the direction. I'm pondering over this because for my power plays, which we'll get to in a few minutes when you give yours, Phil, I debated that one, but I think you might have just sent me over the edge in one direction. So we'll save that for a moment here later in the show. Florida and 8th-ranked Tennessee will stay in the SEC. Volunteers are laying 15.5. 55.5 is the total. 7:30 contest for these two. 16th consecutive sellout in checker Neyland fashion. Trying to help rally the Vols from losing as the favorite on the road at Arkansas, which you called, Phil. Never bet against Sam Pittman. And you love Sam Pittman as an underdog in that role, and Arkansas certainly delivered. Florida looks much improved, though, Phil. 24-13 win over UCF. Florida has won 32 the previous 53 meetings, including all but 2 since 05, won 29-16 in the swap last season. And what does that mean, Phil? Revenge.
Yeah, definitely revenge is on Tennessee's side. And there's no doubt Tennessee's a better football team. They're at home. If they get the chance, they'll lay it on somebody. But Florida has impressed me the last 2 weeks. Last week, they delivered for me against UCF. They led that thing 24-3 at the half. I like the way that Mertz and Lagway are playing. Mertz has been starting. They bring Lagway in, I believe, every third series. I think Tennessee's got the better defense. Tennessee's got the better run game. And quarterbacks are fairly close. I mean, Nico hasn't been overwhelming the last couple of games, but they were on the road at Oklahoma and Arkansas. Now he's back at home where he thrived. So I can see Tennessee winning it, but that's a lot of points to lay Florida with the series. Once again, I'm going to pass. I'm going to leave it to you guys. Pick your game here. Who's got this one?
I think it's too big of a number. I would lean Florida, but for me, I'm staying away. I don't know if I'm getting any real action on this one. Tennessee showed some flaws last week, certainly offensively.
They did. I don't know what to think about Tennessee. I've had to eat crow this week because I've said I thought they were the best team like in the country for a couple weeks now. But I'd probably still lean with Tennessee to cover here, but something just hasn't been right with those guys the last couple times out, even when they covered at Oklahoma. Just looks like they're playing scared or something. I'm not really sure. So honestly, I'll probably stay away from this game.
Quickly, how about Washington State and Fresno State? Two teams off a bye. Wazoo lost to Boise 2 weeks ago. Fresno got destroyed by UNLV. 7 o'clock on FS1. Cougs are laying 3, 61.5 is a total. Washington State seeking first 5-1 start since 2018. 10th rated offense. John Mateer has looked good. 26 in defense, too, with 9 takeaways.
Yeah, John Mateer has looked great. I mean, I thought watching the Texas Tech game, I thought he was mostly a running quarterback, but he's really showing he could throw the football as well. 13-5 ratio, hitting 59%. Of course, the team's leading rusher. Tough to stop. And Fresno just got pounded by UNLV in their last game. Prior to that, they had fattened up on Sacramento State, New Mexico State, New Mexico. They did play good against Michigan, but I'm going to call for Washington State to go on the road and get the win here.
All right, let's go to Oregon State. They're quietly 4-1 on the season here. Only loss straight up against Oregon. They knocked off Colorado State last week in overtime. The Beavers laying 4 on the road at Nevada. And Nevada kept it close last week. We mentioned this already. They kept it close with San Jose State. Any lean here on this one, Phil?
Yeah, I like Oregon State. And you know, I got to be honest with you. I had Oregon State minus the 10.5 last week. We're up by 11. It's the fourth quarter, mid-fourth quarter. And Colorado State's got 3rd and 15. All right, we're going to win this thing. First down, 3rd and 9, first down, 3rd and 14, first down, and then 3rd and goal from the 10-yard line, touchdown. After that, Colorado State came back and played great, almost won it in overtime. So I think I wanted to crinkle up Oregon State and throw them in the trash and say I want to play against these guys, but they are playing really good football. I love the way they beat Purdue. They went on the road and beat San Diego State by 21. Hankerson, a running back, Giovanni McCoy, a quarterback. I think they are the better team, capable of going on the road. I don't think it's an intimidating environment. I'm going to take Oregon State minus the points in that one. And the line's cheap. I think the line would have been 10 had Oregon State covered last week.
Okay. Vanderbilt at Kentucky. We've been talking about Vandy all week, a win of the century over Bama last week. The goalpost, who knows where it is now. I think they should take it back downtown and like just build a bar around the goalpost or something where you like walk through there. But anyways, that's just my idea. They beat Bama, and now look at all the respect they're getting. They're a 2-touchdown underdog at Kentucky. Cats knocked off Ole Miss their last time out. Might be a little bit of a letdown spot for both teams here, but you know, Kentucky's had a little bit of a break since their last game. What do you like in this one?
Yeah, and the thing with Vanderbilt is generally what we see with this letdown spot is teams come off a big win and they're favored and they just don't show up, right? Well, guess what? Vanderbilt's a 2-touchdown underdog. So I get they can easily flip the switch and say, you know what? We're a dog. They feel they can still compete in the SEC. They still feel they compete for a playoff spot, and they gained a lot of confidence last week. Got to love Diego Pavia. I mean, this guy, what he did at New Mexico State and is now doing at Vanderbilt, just remarkable. They're in that home run roll of theirs, which is big underdog. I'm gonna lean with Vanderbilt, even coming off the big win. I think if they were favored, I'd go against Vanderbilt this week, clearly. But the fact they're a 2-touchdown dog, I'm going to lean with Vanderbilt plus the points.
For the sake of time, we're going to blow past Syracuse at NC State, Marshall at Georgia Southern. No disrespect, but all the disrespect. We got 3 games late, so we'll chase. I'll give you Minnesota and UCLA. Then Tripp's got 2 for you. Golden Gophers are laying 5 on the road, 40 the total. 9 o'clock, Big Ten Network. Gophers 24-17 win over USC, allowing 114 passing yards per game. Best in the FBS. First trip to the Rose Bowl since 62. Here's my factoid for you. A 21-3 win in the Rose Bowl over the Bruins. In 1962, that was the first national color television broadcast of a college football game. January 1st, 1962. What do you like in this one? UCLA operating with a new quarterback last week, going with Justin Martin.
Yeah, and they went with Martin because Garbers was banged up. He may return here. We'll have to see. But I lean a little bit with UCLA, just catching Minnesota off a big win and traveling on the road. And UCLA can show some scrappiness. I don't like the way UCLA is running the football, though. So I'd probably favor Minnesota by 3, which has me leaning a little bit with UCLA.
All right, last 2 games on the board. Either one of these that you like here, Phil. Kansas State lane 4 on the road at Colorado. And then we've got the late game at 11 o'clock with Boise State at Hawaii. They're lane 20.5.
Yeah, it's a lot of points on the road. I think of the 2 games, Tripp, I will go with the Kansas State one. I think when you look at Kansas State, they have a line of scrimmage advantage here. They've got the advantage on the offensive line and the defensive line, and I like it when you have a line of scrimmage advantage. They also have a pretty good quarterback in Avery Johnson, who's developing as the season goes on. We know he's a dangerous runner, but he's got 9-4 ratio this year. So I think that line of scrimmage will be the difference in this game. It's a must-win situation for Kansas State. I tell you what, though, if Colorado wins this game at home, I'll change my tune on Colorado for the rest of the year because they'll be dangerous. But I like K-State minus the points.
Dylan Edwards against his former team in Colorado as well, the Wildcats running back. One other note on UCLA, the schedule becomes relenting at this point. They had gone LSU, Indiana, LSU, Oregon, Penn State, and no remaining ranked teams on the current schedule. I know Wayne Cook loves that one. All right, Phil, to close out week 7, your power plays here on the Phil Steele Show.
Yeah, I got 3 of them. We talked about Oklahoma. We talked about Oregon State. So Oklahoma plus the points over Texas, Oregon State minus the points over Nevada. And the other one, to me, it's a really sneaky situation here. It's UMass plus 27.5 against Missouri. If you look at Missouri's October, this is by far the only game that doesn't matter. They've got 3 SEC games in UMass. You look at UMass's October, they've got a bye. They've got an FCS opponent. They've got a MAC team on the road, and they've got Missouri at home. It's a sleepy environment, traveling to the East Coast. Missouri players are probably wondering, like, why are we playing here at UMass? UMass is fired up to the gourd. I like UMass plus the point, plus 27.5. And my AGG only has Missouri winning by 18 as it is, and that doesn't even reflect the situation.
I agree with you full-heartedly on Oklahoma and Oregon State. So for the sake of trying to provide a couple other picks, by the way, if I agree with every fiber of my body, run to the teller right now, get your money. So take Oklahoma plus 14.5. Take Oregon State covering the 3-4. It's a cheap line. They've covered 5 straight road games against Mountain West opponents as well. And if been dominant against unranked competition, I think Michael Hawkins Jr. will provide certainly a different look against Texas. Both teams off the bye. I think they'll be able to cause some havoc against Quinn Ewers if he returns and is rusty, which is expected to happen. So I'm also going Northwestern Maryland. Give me the over. I think 2 improving offenses. That's my first power play. And then to go different from Phil, give me LSU plus the 3.5 at home. I don't know why I thought anything different. That was the reason for the pause earlier in the show. I'm like, wow, he's absolutely right. Why go against Death Valley? I've got some LSU blood in me as well. Daughter born in Baton Rouge. This is a big game for the Tigers. They're going to be able to cover against Ole Miss, who's played 7 games in a row, as Phil noted. And Wyoming, wrong team is favored. That's San Diego State. Give me Wyoming as a home dog to cover the 2.5. Tripp, what do you like?
I thought Phil liked LSU.
He did. Yeah, he talked me on that side.
So you're agreeing. Okay.
Yes,
okay.
I am agreeing. Yeah.
All right. I don't have anything I like. You know what I got? I've got 4 teams that I love in a teaser. You remember? I used to do these. Right. I got a teaser. All right. These are all totals. Give me the UNLV. The total's at 66. You can tease that down to 60. Iowa and Washington. I actually just saw this line. The total right now, you can get it 42. So we bumped that up to 48. It's mathematically impossible for that game to go over 48 points. There's just no way. They could play, they could play 2 games and it won't go over 48. Then Washington State, Fresno, I'm going to go under here. You can get it at 60.5, so tease it to 66.5. And then the last one, Florida, Tennessee, I will jump on this game. I'm going to go under with this one as well. Take it from 56 up to 62. $100 bet can win you $300. I mean, if you just bet $1 million, you could win $3 million. Wow. Can you imagine that, Kyle? $3 million.
Bet $1 million. Okay, I'll pick up the phone.
Or you could just bet $1 and win 3.
Yeah. Thank you, Phil. It's been a blast. At Phil Steele 042. Phil Steele Plus YouTube tour is available now. And next week we get to talk Georgia and Texas. So it just gets even more amazing every single week we get to talk, Phil.
Yeah, I love it. And you guys do a great job bringing up the stats. Always learn something from about the games. And Kyle, I love the history stuff you bring in there as well. So a lot of fun doing the show with you every week.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. Same. I miss my calling as a history teacher. I can hit up Wayne Cook. Why not? Lock Doctor at Doc of the Locks on Twitter, on X at Kyle Schass, at Phil Steele 042. Enjoy week 7. We'll talk next week here on the Phil Steele Show.